Hi, everyone. My name is John French, and I'm an M2. So, today we're going to be talking about life as a medical student, as the name implies down below. And so, we're going to just walk through a little bit of an overview and then kind of go into each of the years and what all those involve. All right. So, just as an overview, medical school is 4 years, of course. Lucky us. And so, the first two didactic years are M1 and M2 years. So this is where we're basically doing a more book learning, a lot of the skills that we're going to be utilized to then go on and practice in the clinic, which again, to follow the PowerPoint, is our M3 and M4 years, right? Where we're in the clinic and we're working with physicians and we're working with patients and getting that hands-on experience that we need. So just to kind of start off, our schedule, at least for the M1 and M2s, there are 4 blocks per year. So, you start at block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. That's the first year. 5 through 8 is the second year. And so each of those is 8 weeks. Okay. And that's both for IPC and PBL. And then you have a week for exams and then a week off. As for your M3 years, you'll be doing your core clerkships, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And then during your M4 year, you do electives, you do another core clerkship, and you also do some other electives as well that you can, where you can do PBL with students here. You can do in-depth dissection of anatomy, things of that nature. Okay, so M1 year. So this is what I went through last year. A good time, I guess. And so you do PBL, and again, that's more of our case-based learning, where we're given a case at the beginning of each week. You meet 3 times a week with your group of 8, and you go through the cases, and that's how you learn a lot of the science. You give presentations, so on and so forth. Along with this, we have lectures that the faculty will give, but those are usually, around 2 hours a day, 1 to 2 hours a day, just depending on the day. We have our anatomy lab during this year, and so that's where you do the dissections. That's where we get to see on our donors, a lot of the in-depth anatomy. And it's really interesting because while there is a lot of work that goes into it, you do learn a lot of the 3D and anatomical variation from person to person. So that's pretty interesting. IPC is, again, learning that more of the patient care side of things. So learn how to speak to patients, take a history, do a physical, those types of skills. And then ACE experiences are where you go into the clinic and work with a physician. That usually happens around 3 times. So it happens for 2 blocks and you go in 3 times, if that makes sense. And then summer, you have various opportunities to do as well. So you can do research, you can be in the clinic for an externships. So there's a lot of different options. And so we'll just carry on. So M2 year, this is more of, again, a repeat of our first year, except this year we don't necessarily have anatomy. But this year we have a lot of pharmacology. We have a lot of pathology that we learn. So you can think of M1 year as a little more of like starting with normal and understanding normal, and then we head into pathology and like pathological processes for more an M2, right? So build on that foundation. And so PBL, we meet twice a week instead of 3 times a week. So that's Tuesday, Thursday instead of Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then again, it's kind of that repeating process of what we did first year. IPC is, again, we have our small groups. We will meet usually once a week in a small group, and then we'll have our lectures typically on Monday. But again, it's variable week to week. This year, we have optional ACE experiences compared to previously where it was required. So if you're interested in, say, a specialty, you can see if those specialties will take a student, and you can look into it. So say you're interested in some sort of field of vascular surgery, you could be working with a vascular surgeon instead of in year 1 where it was just kind of randomly where you got assigned. And so you can specify where you want a little bit more here. Okay, and then advanced physical diagnosis. So again, this is learning those skills of history taking, physical exam, and then using those to diagnose. Okay, preclinical examination. So during our M1 and M2 years, we will have a CRE exam, which is on Monday or Tuesday. And then from that, we have an IPC exam and we have a knowledge base exam. So clinical reasoning is you get cases kind of like in PBL and you walk through them, except you just type it out instead of speaking with your group. And so you kind of do that clinical reasoning. Why do I think this person with these symptoms? Why do I suspect it's these differential diagnoses? IPC exam is it can be short answer, it can be multiple choice, kind of variable on that. Our knowledge base exam is 200 for M1 year to 200 multiple choice test. 30 of those which are in anatomy and 20 which are in histology. 100 and it's 180 for M2 year. For boards, that's after your M2 year, so you'll usually take this in April, May, June. Typically April, May are the usual months, but yeah, that's our step one that we have to take that you've probably heard of already. Okay, M3 year. This is when we start to get integrated into the clinic. And so with this, you're either going to typically be, most students are either out of Columbia here or they're in Springfield, down in Springfield, Missouri. And so you'll be working with physicians at one of the other places. So the core clerkships, as we can see here, you do 8 weeks in them, so 2 months. To that. So roughly it kind of corresponds with our blocks, if that makes sense. Except it's just 3rd and 4th year. And so again, we have our core clerkships, we have 6 weeks in psychiatry, and then 4 weeks in neurology. All right. And then that'll take us to our 4th year, which again, we will be continuing either our core electives, or at this point we can start doing some general electives as well. And look, so in general, these are, and especially with the like advanced clinical selectives, are the fact that you can, start to do other interests. So if you want to do a specialty of some sort, so like emergency medicine, if you want to do something a little more in depth with say like a nephrology, or so if that makes sense. Advanced clinical selectives. So this would be if you want to do something very specified, like if you want to do the ICU specifically, or if you want to do, again, vascular surgery or neurosurgery, and you want to work with those physicians, you can try to do something a little more subspecialized as well there. The advanced biomedical science course is 4 weeks, and so that's either could be helping with PBL as a 4th year, which is kind of interesting. I've had a couple of those M4s come in and help, and they're really helpful. They bring a lot of clinical knowledge, which is really nice to kind of tie into the cases. You can do research, you can do an in-depth dissection, which is also, so if you're interested in ENT, you could do an in-depth dissection of, say, a nerve of the face, of that sort. Okay, you apply for residency, and then, of course, you have match day, which tells you where you're going to be for, depending on your specialty, the next, we'll just call it 3 to 7 years of your life. So there you have it. The schooling never stops, does it? And then, so for clinical examinations here, we have shelf exams at the end of each rotation. You are given a test over that subject or subjects. And so again, it's kind of like our in a block exams, except these are more standardized national exams that everyone takes for the specialty. And then again, at the end of this time, usually we'll take step 2, usually in the 3rd year, kind of in the 4th year, that time frame, you'll take step 2. And then you'll take also the clinical skills, where you'll demonstrate those clinical skills that you've learned through IPC, through being in the clinic, so on and so forth. And then eventually the last one is our USMLE step 3. All right, so I know that was a very fast way of going through this. As like, I guess, just on a personal note, like it doesn't seem like necessarily there's a lot of lecture or a lot of required time, but there is more than enough things that students have to do. It's a lot of self-driven types of studying, but of course the faculty are always there to help you if you need. So yeah, I think that's all I had for you guys. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I don't know if they'll provide the information, but if they don't, yeah, you could always just ask for John French's information. I'll be happy to answer anything or even take calls or whatever you need. All right, cool.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bayo Bello. I'm a 2nd year medical student here at the University of Missouri. So before we go into talk and introduce everyone, I'd like to sort of give you an overview of what we're doing and why this video has been recorded. In this video, we'll be discussing personal experiences of a life of a medical student at here, University of Missouri, to hopefully give our incoming medical student insight into what it is like to be a medical student and what they can look forward to as a medical student here at the university. So having said that, I'm gonna have our panel to introduce themselves. Flavius, would you like to start and pass on to the next person?
Oh, sure, thanks. My name is Flavius. I'm currently a second year medical student. Originally from Cameroon. I grew up in Minnesota. That's where I did most of my schooling. And now I'm here in Missouri Medical School.
My name is Kate, and I am also a second year medical student. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. I did my undergrad at Emory University in Atlanta, and now I'm back at Missouri here at the University of Missouri.
Hey everybody, my name is Peter Iskander. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, so it's possible out-of-staters. And I did my undergrad at the University of Southern California, and I'm loving third year so far. I'll pass it over to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am a fourth year medical student. I'm from East Bay Area, California. Did my undergrad at UC Davis, and then I am non-traditional, so I actually have a master's degree in physiology from Georgetown, so I definitely went all over the place. There were 6 years between undergrad and starting med school, so that is also entirely possible.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you everyone for sharing. So let's dive into it. So I'd like to start this by asking our panel, members of our panel, what medical school is like. You know, how it's been, the excitement starting medical school, and how it's, you know, been so far. So would anyone like to start that, sort of giving experiences so far, but with how it's been as a student here at the university?
Sure, I can start off with that question. Thank you. So what is medical school like, and what's my experience been so far? So we're currently a second year medical student, like I said before, and it's definitely been a huge transition for me. After I graduated from undergrad, I took a year off from school, and I was working, so I took like one gap year. And then it was really exciting, obviously, to start medical school, moving to a new state. I'd never really lived outside of Minnesota before, and I was kind of nervous, but also very excited to be, you know, starting this new journey. And it's been amazing so far. You know, I think one of the most amazing things about medical school is that you get to see how much you can really learn in such a short amount of time. And that's what's really awesome about it. Like, I've always been really curious about things, and just getting to learn so much and realizing how much you learn in such a short amount of time is just amazing. So I've really enjoyed that experience. Obviously, I still have so much more to learn, and that's what really keeps me motivated and excited for what's to come. I'll pass it on to Kate.
Yeah, so I'm also in my second year right now, and the first year went pretty well. I am a traditional student, so I didn't have any time off between undergrad and medical school, which sort of helped in that I didn't have to sort of get back into the zone of studying and test taking. But I moved to a new city that I'd never lived in before with no one I knew, and so I sort of transitioned to living in Columbia. Everyone in our class is really awesome. It's a really supportive environment, which is part of the reason I chose to come here, and it's definitely sort of rung true in my time here as a student. And now in my second year, you know, maybe a little bit more knowledgeable than last year, but still figuring things out and sort of working towards our first big sort of board exam in the spring, and really excited to be learning about more pathology and things like that this year.
Yeah, so being in medical school was, it's a big transition in thought because, you know, you spend so much time getting up to this point where you've got to learn, you know, sometimes things that are not as applicable to your life, right? I'm talking about all those GEs and all that stuff that we had to take, you know, to get here and to finally earn the opportunity to learn. So when you finally get to med school, you know, every single detail you learn, everything, literally everything is going to be going towards patient care and having the optimal type of patient care and learning how the human body works and when it doesn't work and the things to do for that. So every single patient I see, I'm applying, 2+ years of knowledge towards them, and that's going to keep building on and on and on. So I love that, now finally, we've earned, it's kind of like you earn the right to finally start learning about things that you can apply. And that's kind of like med school in general. And then specifically for Mizzou, having completed my first 2 years, it's just awesome. Going through that PBL curriculum, where it's so collaborative, you work a ton with others, you get to, see how well can you work in a team, because I mean, that's really what medicine is. There's no such thing as like one solo rogue doctor, you're always working as a team no matter what. And so I love that Mizzou kind of forces you into that and you get pretty good at it. So it's been an awesome experience so far.
Oh, geez, I gotta think back 4 years now. I forgot to introduce Hermes. This is my cat, Hermes, making his cameo for our thing here. But I'm just gonna repeat like what everybody else has said. There's so much to learn in medicine, and you don't even realize how much until like that first week of med school. I remember like coming into that first week of first block and talking to my mom like I think it was day 3, and I was like, I think I just saw an entire year of biochem in one afternoon. And that feeling never quite goes away. I wish it did, but you kind of get used to having all of that information come at you at the same time. And then when you get to clinical years, you finally get to apply it and you start to get more comfortable with the idea that there is more that you don't know than you actually do know. But then you also know a lot. It's really surprising because just the knowledge of medicine is enormous. And each year is so different. Like I would say first year and second year are the most similar, but fourth year is totally different than any other year. Um, I feel like I have a little bit more independence now. I feel a little bit more confident in what I'm doing. And it's kind of like a weird mix of the feeling of standing on top of a high dive and like wondering about ready to jump in, which would be like residency when I'm an actual doctor, right? And wondering if I forgot my floaties, and then also going, you know what, I do actually know how to swim. And that's kind of an interesting mental space, for lack of better word. But like everybody was saying, like the collaborative nature of stuff, it's definitely all over the place. Like I see things in my clinicals where evals will be like, oh yeah, she worked great with nurses. Like you got to learn how to work with your team, and your team includes non-physicians as well. And that's also really important and really valuable for everybody taking care of patients. So that's all I've got to say at the moment.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was very insightful, and thank you everyone for sharing. Right, yeah, I mean, so we've talked about sort of what our current years are like, but I'd like to be more specific now, if that's okay with you guys. I'd like to share with our viewers at home what a week, sort of a day, and then if you can sort of go beyond that, talk about what a week is like as a medical student in your class. And as it looks now, we don't have a first year student to talk about the experiences, but we do have 2 second year students, actually 3 to count myself, but we can talk about our first year experiences and just sort of a week into a life of a first year medical student, and then we can do that with second year, third year, and fourth year. So Flavius, would you like to share your experience as a first year?
Sure, I'll take the first year role. So the question is, what's life like in like day to day, week to week as a first year medical student? For me, luckily, I live very close to campus. So I don't have to worry about driving to school like some of my classmates do, but you wake up usually 7 a.m. because classes start by 8 and you don't want to be late. So anyway, we walk to class, get there by 8 Mondays, Wednesdays, and yeah, Mondays and Wednesdays, we have classes around 8. And then after that, it's usually like 2 hours of classes, and then we have PBL. I'm sure, I don't know how much you all know about PBL, but I'm sure you will learn a lot about it. But we have PBL on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and that typically lasts about 3 hours or so on first year. And after that, we're kind of let to go on our own devices and kind of do whatever we want. Most students, though, they usually do what we call objectives, which is part of the curriculum, is what you get to do after each PBL session, where you pretty much learn something new and then you get to come back and teach your classmates. So that's usually how it is for like PBL. And then we also have something first year called IPC, which is Introduction to Patient Care, where we learn how to really interact with patients. So we're learning interviewing patients, taking histories. We're learning how to do physical exams. And that's really like my favorite part about med school. You know, you're next to learning all the book stuff and the biology. It's really fun to actually get to see patients. Although the patients first year are actors, but they really play the patient role very well, and you can't really tell the difference. So that really reminds you of why you came to medical school, when you really get to interact with patients in that level and get to talk with them, like pretty much what you'll be doing when you start practicing. So that also starts right away, first week of medical school, where we start interacting with patients. So yeah, that's about what happens in a week, and then we just kind of repeat that every week. And again, you know, learning new information every week, interacting with different patients with different scenarios every week. So that's kind of how I remember it.
Thank you, Flavis. Kate, I'd like you to talk about how second year has been so far, especially with online learning because of the pandemic. So take it away.
Yeah, so the M2 year is sort of similar to what Flavis talked about, except for you have a lot more free time and a lot of your sort of required classes are in the afternoons. So your morning is pretty free. I'm a morning person myself, so I typically wake up around 5 or 5:30 a.m. and do some studying in the morning. I'm really productive in the mornings. And for the most part through the week, our mornings are pretty free, aside from occasional lectures or sort of IPC small groups. And then we have our PBL class in the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We also don't have anatomy anymore your second year, so that also frees up some time. And as I was saying, we are currently remote right now. So as you may be aware, the M1 class are doing sort of a hybrid type of thing where they are in person but practicing social distancing and still doing a lot of work over Zoom as well. Whereas the M2 class, we're entirely on Zoom. So all of our lectures are on Zoom, and we also use Zoom for all of our small groups as well, which was definitely a transition at first when we started in the spring. I think by now a lot of us are pretty used to it. I think it still is not quite as effective and fun of an experience as when you're in person, but it's how the circumstances are nowadays, and we all recognize that it's for sort of the safety of ourselves and also the community. And so after classes in the afternoon, I typically, at least in the beginning of the block, have a chill evening. And that's sort of another nice thing about Mizzou, is that instead of at a lot of schools, you have exams really regularly, like every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we have exams really far out. And so it allows you to still have some of a balance in terms of like academic versus social life and just other hobbies and things like that. So at the beginning of the block, sometimes I'll go home and visit family for a weekend. I go to the farmer's market very frequently and sort of spend time with friends and make sure to sort of relax and do self-care as well. And then as the block continues, having to sort of ramp up the studying for sure. But that's sort of right now, M2 life.
Thank you, Katie. Peter?
M3 year. So M3 year, you take a sharp left and you kind of put everything on top of its head. It's probably the biggest transition in medical school between the years, where you shift from preclinical and kind of a lot of books and note cards and all kinds of things to more in-person and clinical learning, right? So kind of a typical day really depends on what you're on. So at the moment, I'm seeing pediatric cardiology. So I get to have a pretty chill schedule. I get to get in by 8. But a week ago, I was on the inpatient pediatric wards where I had to be up by 5. So I could be in the office by 6:30, or in the hospital by 5:30. So as far as like your day-to-day schedule, it varies the same way that a doctor's schedule would vary, you know, depending on if you're on call or depending on what service you're on and whatnot. And when you're getting there, I mean, you're getting there with the real doctors and the real residents and everything. I mean, they are doctors, but you know, for the sake of argument, like you're getting there when they're getting there, right? And your role, you don't have as much independence, but you do have a pretty sizable amount of independence, and a whole lot more independence than you had your first 2 years. So that involves things like going and seeing patients, you know, where the doctors that you're working with will tell you, hey, go see that patient, find out what I need to know about them. And then when you come back, you have to present these patients to these people who know a lot more than you. And you have to present it in a succinct, knowledgeable, you know, way that makes sense. So third year, especially in the beginning, required a lot of wrangling in, right? So like your first 2 years, you spend so much time learning and you learn such an enormous amount of information. And then you got to now kind of hone in and be like, what do I really know and how can I apply it? And your thought process changes a little bit from trying to understand why everything happens and kind of that underlying meat and potatoes to kind of more now looking for, well, what should I do about it? So you have somebody come in and it's, okay, what should I do? What's the next step in order to make this person feel better? And in my opinion, it's been awesome because now you get it. This is like real doctoring, you know? It's like, well, hey, this person's got X, I'm going to give them Y and let's see what happens, you know? And it's been awesome. And you work with the doctors, and a lot of docs here at Mizzou are fantastic at incorporating your input. They'll ask you what your assessment and plan is and what you want to do. And it's like, are you talking to me or are you talking to that guy, you know? Because it's awesome. You know, you get a lot of responsibility. It feels great. It's very challenging. It's very hard. And I wish I could sleep more, but but it's been a remarkable experience so far. And I'm so glad I'm here. So 30 years been great.
Peter, what rotations have you been on so far?
My first one was family medicine, which is awesome, right? You get to get the whole gamut of medicine, and you get to kind of be on the front lines, and primary care is like the cornerstone of medicine. So that's been really cool to kind of see that. And now I'm on peds. So I get to work with some kiddos. I'll admit I have made a lot of kids cry. I don't know what it is, but I think it's something about the beard. The kids just don't like facial hair. So yeah, Bio's covering his up because I'm telling you, man, it's going to be tough, you know, and with the masks and everything, you know, all they see is the beard and they're like, what's your deal, dude? But peds has been awesome. And to kind of follow up on Katie's question, there are 7 core clerkships that the university deems as kind of like the core medical learning that you need to have in order to graduate. And so those are the first 2 of the 7 that I've done so far, and they've been pretty awesome.
Katie, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So as a 4th year, I have completed 6 of the 7. The 7th one, just the way things are scheduled here at Mizzou, at least in terms of my year, and I know Peter's year. I don't know about Flavis, Kate, and Bio yet, but we had to delay a clerkship into our 4th year. So I ended up delaying neurology, which is a 4-week-long clerkship, which actually lines up really, really well, at least for me, in terms of what I wanted to do with my schedule. As a 4th year, you get a lot more control over what specialties you spend time in, as opposed to 3rd year where you have to meet those core clerkships. So you do all of them. And like Peter was saying, like every rotation is different. Every day is a little bit different. And that's kind of fun and terrifying all at the same time. So I am going into general surgery myself. So a lot of my early rotations of the schedule were more surgery heavy, in particular because as a 4th year, I'm applying to residency. So in those summer months and early rotations of the year, you need to go back and revisit with some of the attendings you might have worked with in third year and try to get letters of recommendation for your application. So that's a lot of like the focus has been from basically the months of July into September, which is now. So you have definitely a lot of differences, and applications this year and applying to residency is totally different than it has been any year ever in the history of medicine. Because with things with COVID-19 and everything, we have to do all of our interviewing and getting to know programs remotely. So that has been very different and challenging, but also kind of unique. It saves me a lot of travel money expenses, I suppose you could say, because you interview at a lot of places and you used to have, well, not used to, but last year you had to go to all of them. And hopefully next year you get to see some people in person, but you never know. So fourth year is very much customizable. So if you're more interested in surgery like I am, you can have more surgery rotations. If you're more interested in family medicine, then you would do a lot more family medicine stuff. Or if you want to do like rural health, everything like that. So the first part of the year is more focused on getting those letters, you get your applications out, and that usually goes out by October. And then after that is kind of your interview season. So for general surgery, you interview from November to January, and it's highly variable how many interviews you get. Most people try to go to about 20 to match into general surgery, and that seems like a lot, but it's because surgery is a little more competitive than other specialties. And then after that, in February is when you have to put together what's called your rank order list, where you basically score programs that you interviewed at and was like, which one do I like the most, kind of thing. And then that goes through what's called the match process. And then you don't find out where you've matched until March. So in that time with interviews and schedules and stuff, a lot of the reason why fourth year has so much flexibility is to allow for those other time commitments, which is really helpful. So you can have up to 3 blocks off in fourth year where you have nothing scheduled. You basically can go on vacation or chill or whatever. And I ended up taking the last 2 blocks off of the year. So basically I match and then I'm done with medical school, which is kind of awesome. Come back for graduation. And so we kind of like wander around, learn weird places, but sometimes you get to work with third year med students, which is actually a lot of fun. You're like, oh, hey, I get to do some teaching. I'm not completely on the bottom of the totem pole anymore. uh, but you also kind of get to see like how far you've come, which is really hard to do in the moment at first, but once you're at this point, it's like, what? Wait, oh, whoa, I'm gonna be a doctor in like 6 months. Holy cow. Um, that's cool and terrifying. Uh, so fourth year is definitely, they say it's like the best year of med school. I honestly don't know because, COVID-19's kind of screwed everybody up this year, but uh, it's definitely the one that you have the most creativity with. And that's really interesting. I know previous years, so this year we couldn't do any away rotations or like global health rotations, obviously because of the pandemic. But previous years have gone and done like global health rotations in other countries during some of those blocks, or you can go and do a rotation at a different medical school program. Some people use some of their summer rotations to do what they call audition rotations, to like spend 4 weeks in a program they might be applying to kind of get a better feel for it, and also to try and get an in to that program, which it's debatable whether or not that actually works. But it definitely gives you some really good exposure and insight. So that's a lot of stuff in fourth year, but it's kind of what you make it, which is really kind of neat.
Thank you very much, Katie. So I was thinking, we talked about like what a week, normally looks like for medical students at the university. But what about the weekend or free time, spare time? What do we do for fun? So other than studying, which I know we do on the weekends as well, but what else do we do to unwind, chill, relax? And it's not always about study, study, study. So
I guess I'll take this first one. So weekends, not only weekends actually, because like it's been alluded to, there's a lot of free time built into the curriculum. So there can be free time that you have even within the week. It's just kind of how you choose to use it. But most of it is in the weekend, and I'm a huge sports junkie, and fortunately for me, there are so many sports that they show on TV. I'm a huge NBA, NFL, and soccer fan, so I watch all of those, and I play most of those as well. So I usually go to the gym a lot. There's a wonderful soccer field right outside the medical school that I use a lot. Not as much anymore, but definitely first year I used it a lot. And also there's a lot of trails around Colombia that I go biking on with some medical school friends. And also weekends is kind of my best chance to kind of go grocery shopping if I need to, or just kind of hang out with friends, watch movies. And I remember we did a lot of game nights. Me and my friends, we did a lot of board games and things like that. I don't really go home as much over the weekends because that's quite a far journey for me. But I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but between blocks, I go home as well and spend some time with family and then come back for the next one. So definitely, I think this curriculum is really built for you, and you kind of use it how you want to succeed. And there's definitely a lot of time for you to kind of relax and take a break from everything.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, not only do I sort of find a lot of time on the weekends for things outside of studying, but even just like, especially early in the block, like I try to sort of stop studying after dinner or sort of at a reasonable time and sort of relax or, just do other things in the evenings. I am a really big like board game junkie, so I play a lot of board games, and if I can't find friends to play board games, I play a lot of online board games. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I really like to cook and bake. I also just sort of spend time with friends, go on walks, sort of go out to eat, in a time before COVID. Because my parents are in St. Louis, I will see them, semi-frequently, especially in between during our break weeks in between blocks. I'm also in a long distance relationship, and I usually at least once a block I will fly. Obviously, this is prior to pandemic, but I would fly out to New York and spend a weekend just like totally removed from studying and just spend time there. And it's nice, and it's nice that I have that ability to just sort of take off for a whole weekend and not think about studying and things like that. So.
Yeah, it's been mentioned a couple times, and I'm going to reiterate it again because Mizzou really gives you so much free time. Many of the students choose to use it to study a lot, and I'm just going to be honest because that's what a lot of students do, and that's why Mizzou students typically like excel and they do really well on their exams and whatnot. But free time is there, so it is there for the taking. And Kate mentioned already, kind of we get this block break. So after your exams, you get a 1 week off completely. And so during my first year when traveling was more available, I went to Vietnam during one of those breaks. I went to Mexico during one of those breaks. You have the liberty to make a decision on what to do. And so that's how I'd use those breaks. And then as far as kind of weekends would go, everything in Colombia is like 3 minutes apart, nothing is too far. Traffic doesn't exist, so it builds a really good relationship with friends because it was never like a trek to go hang out with some friends, have a poker night, have a beer, watch a basketball game or something. It was very easy. So, you never felt too far away from others. And so kind of that small city vibe made it really easy to stay connected. And I love that. And, I wish I had more of that.
So I'm not gonna lie, I kind of miss those 1 week off breaks. You don't really get those in clinical year, just to clarify. You get like a weekend usually, and then you
No?
start the next rotation. So, uh, just to clarify, but you do get like, Thanksgiving break and a Christmas break. And then of course I mentioned in fourth year where you get like 3 months off if you want them, wherever you want them to be in your schedule, which is super nice. So there's a little less freedom as a third year, but definitely a lot more as a fourth year. At least that's been my experience. The things I like to do when I'm not studying all the time, well, I just finished boards, so it's actually I've been in this weird place where I'm not sure what to do with myself because I have been studying so much. I got delayed because of COVID. I was supposed to take it in June. uh, so I play Dungeons and Dragons with some of my friends. I play every Sunday night and sometimes Friday nights too. So sometimes twice a week, which is awesome. We usually play online because it's just easier to like communicate with each other, especially like socially distancing D&D basically. But that also meant that we used to do kind of like dinner parties and play Dungeons and Dragons on Friday nights every week, which was awesome. And I did that especially during like first and second year. It was a little bit harder in third year because we were all on different schedules and sometimes like you're on rotations. I do surgery, so I'm usually up at about 4 in the morning, which is early. So, but that works out okay. And if you have to like round at like 5 a.m., that's when you have to get up. So, uh, in fourth year, you do sometimes work weekends, but not the whole weekend, and definitely not like all day, all weekend. So things change there, but you do get a little bit more freedom with your schedule, is kind of what we're going at. Other things I do for free time. My spouse and I, we like to go for hikes, so we try to do those on weekends and on days that we're off. And if we get any sort of breaks, we usually go and go camping for a few days, which is nice. I had 2 weeks off with my psych rotation last year. Instead of doing the 2 week elective, you have an option. And I went home to visit my family in California, who I hadn't seen in a little while because it's not that easy to get out there sometimes. And that was like the week before they had their first COVID case. So sorry, Missouri. But that was, it was really nice to see them. And then we usually went for the week off for Christmas. We would go visit Ryan's family, who lived in Maryland, so it's the opposite end of the country. So we get some good opportunities to see family and friends.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And so, sort of just to wrap up, I was hoping I could do sort of a two-part question. The first question would be, more advice. What advice would you like to give to incoming first-year students who would be starting here at Mizzou? Any sort of experiences that you've had that has made that you think would make the stay of a first year here at Mizzou beneficial, to know if there's anything like that, any advice or experiences that would be nice to share. Please take the floor and share with our viewers.
Oh, sure. That's a great way to end it. I think speaking to the students out there and the family members out there, I think like if you're a parent, especially, because for me, I really benefit from my mom because she loves to call me, sometimes too much, but I really like that because it really gives me a chance to kind of stop whatever I'm doing, stop being stressed out, just to talk to family. So I think if you're a parent out there, I would really advise to like always be calling your student because medical school, especially the first year, can be a little stressful, and your kid might just kind of get so lost in their books that they kind of forget certain things. So I think I really benefited from my mom always calling me and asking me how things were going and things like that. So I really give that out to their parents. And for the students, I think biggest advice would be to call your parents. Okay. I think it's really nice to just, talk with not only your parents, but maybe friends that are not in medical school that you can just talk to, and, just keep that communication line open, because it can be very easy to forget to make those calls since you're so busy studying. So just keep that communication line open. And just to kind of go off of that, I think for me, there was a lot of times during certain blocks during first year, especially where I was very stressed out. And this is probably due to never having ever been to medical school before. I think going to college and undergrad, there were times that things got difficult, but that level is not the same. The level of stress I felt at certain times in medical school was like nothing I ever felt before. And it was really tough to kind of know how to handle that stress. And I think the best way is just to try to remember why you're here in medical school, because you can get lost in the little details. If you try to remember your end goals, I think can help you in kind of mitigating that stress a little bit. And that's and it's hard to do, right? It's hard to kind of remember your end goal when you're so focused on the next exam. But if you try to remember why you're here, it can really help in those times of stress, because unfortunately, those times will come, especially close to exam week. You will feel really stressed out. And if you just kind of remember why you're here, I think that will really help you kind of reduce that stress level.
Yeah, to go off of something that Flavia said, I think it's really important to put effort in and maintain your friendships and relationships outside of medical school, especially if you are someone like me who sort of came to Columbia not knowing anybody. It's really easy to just get consumed by the medical school bubble, and like that's all you talk about and think about and do all day long is medical school. And so I've really relied on some of my friends and connections outside of medical school and make an effort to FaceTime them regularly and talk about things that aren't medical school, just because it's nice to sort of have that break. And then also I would just add that during your first year, especially in the beginning, for students is to the best that you can, try and not compare yourself and your study strategies and sort of where you're at to other students. There's no like right way or one way to do medical school. And I found myself often sort of getting into the trap of comparing what I was studying to what other people were studying and where I was with my studying to other people. And that's just a sticky slope. And, there's lots of ways to approach it, and everyone's sort of on their own journey, and it's pass fail. So, just work together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important that everybody knows Mizzou is pass fail. Okay. So I guess the advice I would share is the same advice I gave my two little sisters who just recently started grad school as well. Was number one, I would say that you must remain humble. Because when you kind of get into med school, you learn so much information so quickly that you are like instantly catapulted to like the top 1% of knowledge, in America, like you have so much information that you almost kind of feel untouchable at one point. You're like walking in the street and you see somebody and you're like, I've learned about their medical condition. I know about you, just from my books. And that's like a very powerful feeling, right? So some people might lose themselves in that. And it's important to remain humble, because you got to remember that no matter what, there's someone out there who knows more than you, right? You are never at the maximum capacity of your knowledge, and the moment you think you are, you kind of lose that drive, you lose that fire to kind of like want to continuously learn and be better at your craft, right? Because we're healers as doctors, right? And you can never know too much. You can never know enough, actually, about the art of healing and whatnot. And I guess the second piece of advice I gave them was to remain relentless. Because, and that's just in every aspect, right? So if you're going to be studying, be relentless in your studies, work hard, don't give up, go nonstop, do what you got to do. But then when it's time to relax, be relentless with your relaxing, like go all in. Don't you know, be like, oh, I'm just going to lackadaisically watch television while I do some note cards or something, you know, because that's kind of contributes to burnout, and it contributes to kind of feeling trapped within this like never ending cycle of like being a med student and studying and all that. Right. You know, if you're going to relax, relax all the way. If you're going to do something fun all the way. You know, I found myself in my second year, like sometimes I wouldn't do fun things. So I was guilty about not studying. I was like, oh, well, if I'm not going to study, I'll just sit here. You know, I can't do something too fun, you know, because if I'm doing something fun, I'm wasting time. I should be studying. So either way, if you're going to study, be relentless with your studying. If you're going to relax, be relentless with relaxing, and, you know, go all in no matter what.
You guys have some really good advice. I like your pearls. Um, I'm going to say a couple of things. One, kind of like what Peter said, you know, go relentless with your studying, but more so give yourself permission to do nothing. It's okay to do nothing. Like you get so busy in med school, especially if you like trying to do like extracurriculars or you want to volunteer here or do that, then you're so used to like going that you forget that it's okay to just chill. Like it's okay to sit on your porch and like have a cup of tea and like just stare at the trees while the wind blows them for hours and just be totally have some people would say useless. It's okay to do nothing. And actually that's also really important is to give yourself time to just be because it's really easy to get overwhelmed in medical school. It's super easy to get overwhelmed. And like Peter was saying, like being humble, I was cracking up at it because I feel like I get reminded every single day at how much I still don't know and how much there is left to learn. And I think if when it comes to like wanting to become the best doctor you can be, you also need to make sure that you're also a human and be able to be approachable with your patients and treat them like human beings and interact with them on that level. Because even though you're getting filled with all this knowledge, that's valuable, it's useful, and it gives you power to help people, which is amazing. You also need to be able to not underestimate the power of just listening to your patient, of just reflecting with them as a human being. Like I've worked with some attendings who take a few minutes and ask their patients, "Hey, how are your kids?" Like that's cool. Like make sure you take the time to do that. I would say that's huge. And then the other thing is even though you feel like you might know nothing, which is like how I feel constantly, that imposter syndrome is super real. It doesn't go away. I wish I said it. I wish I knew that it did. It doesn't. I actually asked an attending once, like when that feeling that you don't know something or don't know anything goes away, and he's like, no, but you do get more confident in what you do know, and you're not the only one having those feelings. So don't be afraid to share that part of yourself with people that are, you know, your friends, that are your safe people, because it's important to know that you're not alone in some of those insecurities that can happen as you're going through your training, as you're studying for step and you're freaking out, or you're coming up on your first med school exam and you're again freaking out, or you failed a med school exam and you have to remediate and you're freaking out. Like you are not the only one going through this, and you're not the first one to go through it. You're definitely not the last one who's going to go through it. And so don't be afraid to speak about that experience with each other, because it normalizes it for us. Because I know for me, like when I'm scared or anxious or, you know, feeling shame, hey, I didn't do so well on this thing, I feel like I did something wrong or I'm defective or something. But knowing that, say, like my friend also struggled with this helps me validate those feelings a little bit. It's okay to not be perfect. And that's what I mean. Give yourself permission to be human.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your advice and your kind words and everything that you said so far. So we have come to the end of this recording. But before we leave, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to everyone who's taking time out of the busy schedules to talk about the experiences as medical students here. I'm once again very grateful. So to round up, I'd like to also express thanks to our families for listening in and trying to learn more about Mizzou and our lives here at the university. And so that's the end of it. And so we all wish our incoming medical students great times at university. We wish them all the best and good luck in all their endeavors. Bye, guys.